In the intricate web of international trade, the relationship between India and the United States has long been one of mutual benefit and economic growth. Over the past few decades, the US and India have transformed their economic partnership into one of the most dynamic in the world. By 2024, the total trade between the two nations exceeded $191 billion. This figure is a testament to the strength and depth of their bilateral trade in goods and services, underscoring how deeply integrated India has become in the global economy, particularly through its trade with the US. However, the recent developments in US trade policy, particularly the tariff measures announced by President Donald Trump on April 2, 2025, are bringing a new layer of complexity to this relationship. The US has decided to impose a 10% baseline tariff on all imports, with further tariffs targeting countries like India that have significant trade deficits with the US. As part of this new policy, India faces a sweeping 26% tariff on a range of goods. This substantial increase in tariffs is set against the backdrop of long-standing trade tensions and policy disagreements between the two countries. India, as the world's fifth largest economy in 2025, finds itself at a critical juncture. The country's economy has been on an impressive upward trajectory, overcoming challenges posed by the global pandemic and economic downturns. With a GDP of approximately $3.7 trillion, India has proven its resilience. In 2023 to 2024, the country's economic growth rate surged to 7.2%, one of the highest among major economies. This growth has been fueled by an expanding industrial base, a thriving services sector, and strong domestic consumption. India has also built substantial foreign exchange reserves, which stand at about $635 billion, providing a safety net against global economic shocks. However, despite these successes, India is not immune to external economic pressures. The new tariffs imposed by the US could have serious implications for several key sectors in India. The IT sector, a cornerstone of the country's export economy, is particularly vulnerable. India's information technology services generate around 60% of their revenue from US clients, and the imposition of tariffs could lead to higher operational costs and reduced demand for services. This shift could potentially harm the competitiveness of Indian firms in the global market, especially as US companies look for alternatives. The pharmaceutical sector, another pillar of India's export economy, could also face significant challenges. India is often referred to as the pharmacy of the world due to its dominance in the production of generic medicines, which supply nearly 40% of the generic drugs consumed in the US. With the new tariff measures in place, Indian pharmaceutical companies could see their profit margins squeezed as costs rise and demand for their products falls. The tariffs could ultimately make it harder for India to maintain its position as a global leader in the pharmaceutical industry, especially as the US seeks alternatives to ensure access to affordable medicines. The textile and apparel industry, which is one of India's largest employers, is also at risk. While India has long been a significant exporter of textiles to the US, the tariffs could erode the competitiveness of this sector. India is already facing stiff competition from countries like Bangladesh and Vietnam, and these new tariffs could further threaten its position in the global apparel market. With millions of jobs, particularly among women, tied to the textile industry, the potential fallout from these tariffs could have profound social and economic consequences. The broader economic impact could also be significant. Projections suggest that if the tariffs are imposed across multiple sectors, India's GDP growth could slow by anywhere between 0.2 to 0.7 percentage points, depending on the severity of the tariff hikes. While India's economy remains robust and its growth is expected to outpace most large economies, any reduction in growth could place additional pressure on job creation, poverty reduction, and efforts to improve living standards. On the inflation front, India could experience a mixed impact. If exports to the US fall significantly, some goods could flood domestic markets, which may lead to a decrease in prices, particularly in industries like textiles. However, a weaker rupee could exacerbate inflation by increasing the cost of imported goods, especially fuel and electronics. This tug-of-war between lower domestic prices and higher import costs could force the Reserve Bank of India to adopt careful monetary policies, balancing the need to support economic growth while keeping inflation in check. One area that could be particularly affected is India's currency. As export revenues decline, the rupee is likely to face depreciation pressures. While a weaker rupee could eventually make Indian goods more competitive in other markets, in the short term, it could drive up the cost of imports, especially those in essential sectors like oil and technology. This could lead to a widening current account deficit, though India's strong foreign exchange reserves should help cushion the immediate blow. Despite the immediate challenges posed by these tariffs, India has several strategies it can employ to mitigate the economic impact and safeguard its future growth. One of the primary responses has been to reduce India's dependence on the US as a trade partner. India has been working to diversify its trade relationships, particularly with regions like Southeast Asia, Europe and Africa. India has already established trade agreements with countries like the United Arab Emirates and Australia, and it is currently negotiating deals with the European Union and the UK. These agreements, if successfully concluded, could provide Indian exporters with alternative markets and help offset losses from the US. India's Look East policy is another key element of this diversification strategy. By strengthening ties with countries in Southeast and East Asia, India hopes to expand its export base and reduce its vulnerability to tariff measures imposed by the US. Although India previously walked away from the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, in 2019, the government may consider rejoining the agreement if US tariffs continue to escalate. India is also shifting its focus toward high-value exports. In sectors like pharmaceuticals and IT, the government is encouraging the production of more specialised and advanced products. This strategy aims to differentiate India's exports and maintain its competitive edge, even in the face of tariff hikes. The Production-Linked Incentive (PLI) scheme is a vital tool in this strategy, incentivising the development of advanced manufacturing capabilities in sectors like electronics, automotive components, and medical devices. Domestically, India's growing middle class, urbanisation, and improving digital infrastructure offer significant opportunities to drive internal economic growth. With a projected 600 million people in the middle class by 2030, India's domestic market is set to become one of the largest consumer markets in the world. As a result, India can focus on strengthening its internal consumption to reduce reliance on export markets. The government's initiatives, such as the PM Gati Shakti, plan to enhance connectivity and logistics, could further bolster this strategy, making India's manufacturers more competitive, both domestically and internationally. In the face of these challenges, India is also pursuing diplomatic channels to ease the burden of US tariffs. The Indian government may seek direct negotiations with the US to obtain exemptions or favourable terms, particularly for sectors where India has a clear competitive advantage. Given India's growing strategic importance to the US in the Indo-Pacific region, there may be room for negotiation, especially as both countries have common geopolitical and security interests. Despite the tariff pressure, India's diversified economy, strategic trade partnerships, and focus on domestic consumption should help it weather this storm. While the new tariffs could lead to short-term disruptions, India's long-term strategy of diversification, innovation, and structural reforms is likely to ensure that its economic growth remains strong.